So welcome to the Mission 5 commentary for T2X. Thanks for sticking with us this long. This is the first real map that exclusively takes place in Sunnyport. This is the smuggler hideout map. This is where Isaiah has to go in and gather information on the smugglers. And originally, we wanted to have a little bit more of Sunnyport at the start of the map, but this is kind of a slow-paced map because we had some very specific objectives, so I wanted to make the action start a little bit sooner. So you actually start in the caves, in the smuggler caves, and then go forward and start to interact and sneak right away.
Yeah, and the caves were, it was an idea we had pretty much from the beginning when we knew we had smugglers. We didn't want to put them in just a plain Jane kind of, a house or a hideout or something like that. Or, we didn't want to put them in the sewers because the sewers had, we've kind of done that in some of the original missions, and even in this expansion already. We've already done some sewers, and there will be some more to come. So we didn't, I felt like, especially with the Thief Gold thing with the Thieves Guild, you really, you just didn't want to revisit that again, and it was too obvious. And so that was one of the reasons that we came up with the whole front of the candy store, and we thought, what's an environment that we've not really done yet in Thief? Caves. We had a couple of them in Into the Maw.
Yeah,
things like that, but they were
down in the Bone Horde. But that was early in Thief 1.
Right, right, and it was an undead kind of thing. This we wanted to see some caves where guys were actually living there. How could you make a comfortable home, as it were, and hide out and all that out of a cave system? And so that was kind of the concept for this that the plot team came up with. And again, the developers, Dave, worked a lot on this map. Or you did this whole map by yourself, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of your exclusive. And again, it really, even better than what we envisioned. I don't think our ideas for this were real specific, other than just it needed to be kind of dark.
Yeah, originally the plot called for caves exclusively, and then the smugglers would set up shop in the caves and move some of these exotic goods that they had stolen into the caves. So you'd have caves with Victorian rugs and tables and paintings and nice vases and so forth that you'd see. But really, I found very early on as I was building this map that that didn't seem to work too well. It felt a little bit out of place. Mm-hmm. Doing exclusively caves meant that it was difficult to navigate around and find your way around. And so I started experimenting with the locations a little bit and found that I kind of like these outdoor areas with this kind of little creek that runs through here. So you get like a nice contrast with the night sky. And then also in the original draft, I built a little hideout like into the rock. So instead of having just caves, there was this little structure in there that they built where they kind of hang out and sleep, and that existed inside the caves. But as I played it and as the map developed, I really kind of found that I liked the hideout much more than the caves, both in terms of gameplay and in terms of aesthetics, because it gave us a lot more flexibility to do what we wanted. So I kind of got permission and took a lot of liberties and kind of built this hideout back in the rock, this old keep that is hidden down here amongst these caves where the smugglers live.
And the waterfall is great. It's, to me, a real memorable moment in Thief 2 is Trail of Blood, when you come around the corner and there's that huge waterfall coming out of the mouth, in the rock. And I was glad we get to kind of see a waterfall again. It worked real well.
We wanted to bring those visual elements in. We wanted, in general, this to be very atmospheric and moody, because this is a hardcore sneaking mission. Mm-hmm. This is one of the only times when we exclusively limit the player to not attack the enemy and to not be seen. And there's a precedent for that in Thief and Thief 2, but it does make the game very hardcore stealth. It doesn't leave it open to very many play styles, and so we really didn't want to do it very often.
Well, and I think, most Thief fans across the board, in general, Looking Glass could do no wrong. But when we all hit Gervasius mansion for the second time in Thief 2, when you realize I got to play this again, it was kind of, that was a real kind of a bummer in that game that was going so well to that point, and they just thought, what is this? And it wouldn't have been so bad, I think, if it hadn't been for that forced no kill, don't be seen objective. And we wanted to, if we were going to do that, we really wanted to do it right. And part of that was having a really spectacular level design here that was, again, different from anything that we'd seen. And I think that came through real well. I mean, I I've played this map a million times, and it's still a fun map to me.
Yeah, we wanted to make it not too long and not too frustrating. So we knew that the player was going to be moving through this space very slowly because they got to be very careful of guard patrols. So we didn't want it to drag on and on forever. We wanted to keep it very succinct. And we wanted to keep the guard patrols dense enough to be challenging, but sparse enough where players aren't going to get too panicky or just run out and get caught and get frustrated too easily. So it's a very delicate balance.
Yeah, and I remember the first few versions of this, probably the first 2 or 3 versions that I played through when you first built them. I just kept coming back saying, "Man, you can't ghost this," and there's no way to avoid these guys, some of their patrol paths and all, and you really scaled back the AI activity, and it's balanced pretty well. It may just be that I suck at playing Thief again, but
no, I think it's actually a kind of a newbie mistake to really put too great of a density of guards when you're doing stealth gameplay, because if you notice, like in the original missions for Thief and Thief 2 and for other good stealth games, there's really fewer guards but more meaningful guards. Like the guards occupy more space, like they have slightly longer patrols. It's more of a meaningful experience to sneak by them. A lot of times fan mission authors get carried away in trying to make their mission challenging and will just put like 3 or 4 guards in a room, and that's not really what you want. You really want like 1 or maybe 2 guards that have a really meaningful impact on the space.
Now I'm sure this moment right here that we're looking at, everyone who played this game experienced this little bit of frustration of putting your ice platform out there, and then you jump to it, and then you go to jump to the wall, and you miss the wall, and you fall down in the water. If they didn't do it in the train mission in that one spot, then they did it here.
Yeah, that's probably my fault here, not lining this up just perfectly. But I did, as lead designer, like one of the things I wanted to do though is to make sure that there were scenarios where you could use your ice arrows in every single map, and really like we could have done a lot more with it, I think, but we did end up having like 1 or 2 scenarios in every map, which is good.
Yeah. And you know what I like about what I thought was good about the ice arrows when you make those platforms is that they're not permanent. You have a limited amount of time to get on them and get where you're going, and that just added kind of just a little. It just tweaked the tool a little bit, and made it a little bit more added a little more tension to it.
And also prevented any problems with you getting stuck against it or anything like that.
Right. But and some good climbing here, getting around the edge, and you really felt like. To me, playing this, I just felt like I haven't seen this yet. This is Crag's Cleft had a little bit of this kind of environment with the the facade of the the structure that you could play around outside and then go inside, secluded up here like this. But it really to me was just one of the more unique and original designs, levels that we had as far as environment. And it had to be because we're going to spend some more time here later,
Exactly. The idea, you brought up Gervasius's Manor, which was at the end of Thief 2. There's this idea in Thief 2 that basically you would replay the same mission twice. It was the same geometry, and the idea was that the first time you would go in and you would kind of learn the layout of the mission, you would explore and kind of see the whole layout of the map, and then in the second mission you would come back and the mission would be much harder because it was assumed that you'd be familiar with it, and that didn't work, I don't think, for a variety of reasons. I think it was paced wrong. It was at the end of Thief 2 and you wanted to be done with it. There was not really very much variety at all. It was very challenging to the point of being almost frustrating at times. Right. And a lot of that is really due to the fact that they ran out of time at the end of the Thief 2 development cycle. I think they probably could have cut both of them and been fine. But it was kind of an interesting idea. So on T2X, when we were dealing with the smuggler hideout here, we kind of had this idea that we could use the space multiple times. We could use it once and then maybe come back to it again later, and have kind of like a different gameplay scenario in both settings.
Right.
But we wanted to make those 2 missions like as different as possible. We wanted the geometry to be the same, but none of the gameplay to be the same. Right. So
and it did save us some time on from having to build a whole new
it saved us a little
scratch.
bit.
But there is an advantage to that.
Yeah, at the same time though, it means you have to lock down your geometry and really be happy with everything. Otherwise, you end up creating more work for yourself because you got to maintain changes between 2 maps. So it's a blessing and a curse, I think. But anyway, this first time that you come in, you have to go ultra stealth. Everything is very dark. It's nighttime. You're sneaking around. You're stealing a lot of stuff. It's kind of traditional sneaking gameplay, but you can't really use a lot of your tools. and that's pretty much the whole crux of the mission. The second time you come here, which we'll get to later in Into the Fray, that's mission 9. It's daytime. It's a heavily scripted map. The layout's a little bit more linear, like some areas are off limits. There's lots of fighting and shooting and violence going on everywhere, and it's really just a crazy climactic map. And so we wanted to use the same geometry, but really do just completely different things with it.
And we'd not seen anything like that before. Of course, now we have with Thief 3, with people fighting in the streets and all that. But at this point, we'd not.
Yeah.
It was still kind of a new thing, other than maybe some fan missions. But there's something else I was going to mention here with this one, it again kind of exposes, the level of talent or whatever between missions. This is a mission that I did all the text and the documentation for, and kind of fleshed out the characters. And when I play it, I find that even having created, I sometimes I really one of my regrets is that you've got the two leaders of this thing. You've got Grissom and Neeson, and the names sound similar, but also there's not really a lot to differentiate between those two guys. And I felt like you didn't. They weren't as fleshed out and memorable, I guess, as the curator or the hotel, Finkel later on, that Valletta did. And it's again just, not trying to beat myself up. I'm just trying to say that, again, you can't underestimate the importance of the minor characters, the role that they play, and really having good backstories and good
idiosyncrasies
fiction.
and good quirks
and
stuff
little
like
quirks
that.
and stuff, because if they're just names on a page, it doesn't stick with the player, and that's one thing I wish that I had spent a little more time on with this one, so that those two guys would stick out in the player's mind, like some of the other minor characters that Valletta and Toole had worked on. But maybe in the 25th anniversary edition.
Well, part of the problem I think too is that those characters weren't present in the same way that they Limes is present in the museum, and one of the reasons behind that was because we didn't want to give the player the impression that she could come in and kill everybody in the map, and the fiction would be over. Zaya doesn't come in here and try to attack everybody or kill everybody in one shot. This is an ongoing organization where guys are coming and going all the time. Right. It's got its own little internal structure, like its own leaders, right. And she's going to have to do something pretty radical in order to get them to. Right. To get them to cease doing what they're doing.
Well, that's something that Valletta has pointed out too. That in the development of the plot and all that, is that you got to kind of understand where Zaya's at this point. She could have maybe come in here and killed a couple of guys, and went out in a blaze of glory or whatever. But that wasn't good enough for her. She was so enraged over what these guys had done to Kadar, and so and kind of being poisoned by Malik as well, that she wanted to bring the whole organization down, the whole structure down, and that that and her character kind of gave us license to spend a few more missions here trying to set these guys up and frame them, and for some of the missions that are coming, that it wasn't good enough for her just to kill the leader or something like that, because another guy will step in and take his place. So the idea was she means business. It's not just about vengeance. It's about setting things right and ridding the city or ridding the earth, however you want to put it, of these guys that are so evil and malicious and all that. And she really took that seriously to the extent that she was willing to plan this out and go through 3 or 4 missions of plotting and doing everything that she did, rather than just running in there with sword drawn and dying in a blaze of glory. So
right, and that was why it was fictionally crucial to have it so that she couldn't attack anybody in this map. The idea was that they wouldn't know that she was there, that this was all planned very carefully, very meticulously.
Right. Well, and you need the passage of time too. I think the whole time, just character-wise, the whole time this is going on, she's reading more and more about these guys, other people that they have robbed and murdered, and she overhears conversations about that within her, there's kind of a rage that's building up and an indignation, that's building up that somebody's got to stop these guys, and in this corrupt city, nobody's going to do it, so I'm going to do it. And that's not something that the conclusion that somebody just comes to overnight. It takes a while, and she had to have some more knowledge, and she's smart. She's going to plan, and she's going to plot out exactly how to do this and try to be creative in the way that she does it, but also remain out of sight, so that nobody even knows that she was involved in it, and so all those things about the development of her character, we felt like was justification then to have repeated missions in Sunnyport and go visit the Hammers and do all these things that she's going to do.
And one of the points that Valeda brought up too was that this is really a pretty vindictive mission. She doesn't just go and write a letter to the Hammerites and tell them that the smugglers are there. She wants to do something that's going to make them eradicate. Yeah, so enraged that they're going to eradicate the smugglers off the face of the earth completely, not just arrest them and throw them into Cragscliff.
Right. So. And as much as we wanted to just do some undead missions, we really felt like we needed you got to have story justification for sending her down into the mausoleum where she's going to go here in 2 missions. To do all these things, and again, it's kind of a roundabout way of getting there, but it was, you're dealing with a fairly large group of people that are throwing out ideas and trying to come up with character motivations, and we want to get her into a crypt. How do we, realistically, how do we do that? Well, sometimes you have to be a little roundabout.
I think it
more so than if you were writing a novel or something.
The game can be more direct.
Very different.
But one thing that is really good about the way these missions are structured is that you really are fighting different enemies every time. You really have variety from map to map in terms of gameplay, in terms of the enemies that you're facing. So that was one of the things that I didn't like about Thief 2, about the end of Thief 2, was the fact that you were fighting the Mechanist over and over again for like 5 or 6 missions, and it got to be a little monotonous.
Right. And that was remedied, in Thief 3,
we were...
it's really broken up quite a bit between the different factions and so on. But, and we tried to, with the smuggler caves, it was really... we really wanted to try to convey just that, how scrupulous and unscrupulous these guys were, just lack of ethics, lack of morals, lack of, they just totally in it for themselves, and even, willing to betray each other to some extent. And you hear about guys wanting to defect, and
we wanted to create to the Thieves Guild in there,
right? The Thieves Guild, and we wanted just a lot of internal turmoil, because there is no honor among thieves really, and we wanted that to kind of come through, and hopefully the player will be as disgusted with that mindset and that mentality as the character, as Zaya is, especially coming from a culture where that, this kind of corruption is in large part foreign to her. Garrett is used to it, grew up around it, very cynical because of it, but she, was very innocent and in a loving family, and so it's just... very disturbing to her that these kind of activities are going on, and these guys are just, there's no justice, being brought to bear on these guys.
Yeah, so we did as many things as we could to kind of characterize the smugglers. We have those readables in there, their environment. We have the actual look and aesthetic of the smugglers themselves. They're actually reskinned and slightly modified Thief 2 guards. I originally got the models actually and changed their weapons out from swords. A couple of the guys have swords, but we also gave them like spiked clubs and axes and just some brutal kind of primitive looking weapons. And then Muzzman, actually the audio guy, did the skins near the very beginning of the game, and made them look like pirates, like rough, rugged around the edges. Pirates, and did a really good job with them. So I think even visually they kind of come through the way that we wanted.
All right.
And
there's also was this not another mission where you kind of built? Did you build this whole thing like what we're going to see in the mission 9? I guess it is.
I kind of built the whole map and then ended up texturing and lighting it for this map, the Redistribution Game, first, because I thought it was more important for the map to look good the first time you see it at night. Right. There's some problems with daytime aesthetics in Thief that we'll get to when we get to map 9, but I think it was important to make this really moody and to establish kind of a look for it. And this actually contrasts with a lot of the earlier missions too, because as opposed to like Victorian or Romanesque or Gothic architecture, here I went with more of kind of a medieval look. So you have like this dirty like orange stone with like wood supports, like some flat ceilings in different places, to give it kind of that more keepish look. Looks like an old medieval keep, and actually structured like one too. I wanted to build here like a great hall, which is kind of like the central room, and then there's a well room where they draw their water up, and then there's like some sleeping quarters and some eating quarters, but it's really and a kitchen. But for the most part, it's really a pretty simple layout.
Well, and the other thing I think you accomplished here too that I think was in some of the original plot documents that we did was we didn't want them to be smugglers that just lived in filth and dressed raggedy and didn't bathe. We wanted them to be because they're not just stealing money; they're stealing artwork. They're stealing high price stuff that they're selling to museums. And so we wanted some sense of refinement to these guys, which I think you brought out by using kind of some of the newer rug textures. And we do have some vases sitting out, and it's not just a trashy place. It's definitely hidden away, and it's a guy's, it's a den of thieves, but at the same time there's a sense of, I think, of sophistication, refinement that comes through from the design, and we really wanted that. We didn't want them to just be your typical dirty, filthy smugglers.
It's the Scarface phenomenon. It's the leaders want to think of themselves as as high class gangsters, as opposed to like really just pirates, which is what they are.
Right, and that was something I remember we originally felt was real important to. Especially because they're selling to a museum, which we had to have that so she could make the connection. If they're selling to a museum, they're not walking in there, as a bunch of ruffians. Somebody can go in there and deal with limes on his own turf.
Yeah,